use and control land in Tanzania on equal basis as men. But first of all, I think the other thing that I should emphasize that is very key when it comes to land ownership, particularly with the Land Act number 4 that deals with the general land, because we have two tenure categories in this country. We have the general land where we provide a certificate of occupancy, and then we have the customary land that is also provided by a different legislation. But the key areas where we had problems in the past, although the legislations are very clear, the talk of equal access, it was in the rural areas. But now we have typical examples where there are key success stories for women access to land that is very much increasing. One of the areas where you can cite as examples is we know that the UN Women is championing some projects in this country where, for example, in Ikungi region where 5,050 CCROs have been actually printed there. And amongst those, 2,030 are for women, which is equivalent to 41%. So you can see the balance between men and women is just coming to an equal status. The other area where is very key, and it has been shown clearly, where now the right of women to access, own, and control land can also be cited in Iringa and Mbeya, where we had the land tenure assistance. It was also a project where more than 56,000 CCROs were issued. And amongst those ones, 27,639 were for women, almost 50%. So there has been an increase actually in women access, control, and the use of land in this country. The other area that is very key and that's very important, it is how women are involved in the institutions of decision making. The Village Land Act provides very clearly that in the village areas, there will be the Village Land Committee. That is the committee that deals with the land, and it is provided that it has to constitute 9 members, of which 4 has to be women. These are institutions which are very important when it comes to decision making. And even in the village assemblies where decisions have to be made in the villages, there is no restriction for women to participate and provide and echo their decisions when it comes to land administration and management in rural areas. Even in the urban areas where we have the law that clearly provides for committees that have decisions as to who should own land in this country, which we call is the Committee for Land Allocation in district areas. Again, it very much clearly puts it provides that in those institutions, at least 2 should be women in order to give them an opportunity to speak on behalf of other women. So there has been some kind of success stories when it comes to how do we own and control land in this country, provided that we have these 2 tenure arrangements. And recently we have seen that there is an increased number of women accessing land in this country. There are other areas where maybe men may own land and you might need a control of women. If you, again, our law is very clear. It provides for circumstances through which matrimonial properties can be disposed of. For example, if you go into section 114 of the Land Act, it provides for spouses' consent. The aim of that one is to make sure that even where men own land, but when it comes to disposition of the same, it provides for spouses' consent in that particular area in order to make sure that spouses' consent when it comes to dispositions, women have a say in the whole process of disposition of land. The other area which is very, very important, and particularly in the preparation of land use plans, because as we know that in the rural areas, in most cases, women there use this firewood for uses. Now, when it comes to land use planning in the rural areas, women also have a very key role to play in the preparation of village land use plans, and subsequently to the issuance of a certificate of customary right of occupancy. So those are the areas where now you can see our tenure system that is very important. And we also understand that there are customary laws sometimes in some particular tribes that forbids or they have an impact in women access to land. But that one is very, very, very much clearly provided in our legislations that an access to land for a woman is the same as an access to land to men. So now actually we are trying to review our land policy of 1995 to make sure that those circumstances that provide for example, when it comes to tribal or communal land, tribal land actually, where there has to be consent on the tribal basis when it comes to ownership for women, we are trying to review those kind of provisions that actually have an impact on women getting or accessing the same on equal basis. So to be brief, what we have seen in terms of the legislations that we have, that is emanating from the National Constitution, our Constitution of 1977, and from the subsequent legislations that came in, the land policy, the land legislations, all of them actually provide access, equal access to men and women. Of course, we understand there are some kind of, the areas which are difficult when it comes to implementation, which actually we also thank our partners because we have been partnering actually very well to make sure that we continue to provide education in this country to make sure that actually the society, our communities understand that women have equal right to own, to dispose of their properties as men do. Again, like what has actually been happening in different places where we issue certificate of occupancies or we issue customary right of occupancy, you see sometimes men own, there is a co-ownership. Not only women own land in their own category, but again, sometimes men own land together with women. And that has been actually, it has been vividly shown in the transactions and in the practice which we all share here, that there is a co-ownership, a situation where men and women can own together, or a group kind of ownership, which everybody has a share in the ownership as a whole. So that is another area that's very important. So when we want to talk about women access to land, then we look into the legislation itself, but we look into the institutions that make decisions with regard to who owns land, who owns land, who controls it, and who has the power when it comes to disposition of the land. And on the basis of that, like I've said, that the institutions that provide for the management of land, particularly in the rural areas, actually provide for women to participate fully and engage in the entire process of land ownership, control, and the disposition of the same. So having said that, to be brief, I would suggest and say that we have a law in place that's very important. We also understand the issues because we work together with other non-government organizations like Landesa. We work with other institutions to make sure that if there are areas which we think we need to fix them to ensure that we continue to maintain the ability of women to access land in this country. It is very, very much welcome. That's why we are trying to review. And much of these institutions that I'm saying, the NGOs and community-based organizations, were very much involved in the review of the land policy, because we think that there were gray areas in the current land policy. But the aim is to make sure that we provide an equal opportunity for women to own, control, and access to land in this country. Thank you very much for the opportunity that you have given to me to share with you the experiences that we have in this country. Thank you very much.
Honorable Commissioner, I thank you very much for your informative presentation on existing land tenure system in Tanzania, but also by highlighting key provisions in the existing legal framework of Tanzania relating to women's land rights. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, I just also want to remind you that you can make good use of our chat box. We have a chat box where you can, drop in if you have some questions or any intervention that you may wish to share with the rest of the group. I think that is the appropriate place and a platform to use. But also at the end of the presentation, we shall have a Q&A session, some sort of dialogue. And at that stage, we shall see time permits. We may, raise some of the questions in your chat box so that distinguished participants, panelists would be able to respond to your questions. Again, as I promised, we have the best of the best in Tanzania in terms of land issues, in terms of women's rights and women's empowerment and the like. So let's not miss this opportunity to engage with people who knows who are the best in terms of their areas of work where they are now doing. Now, with that note, allow me now to invite the next speaker. The next speaker is Ms. Naomi Shadrach. Naomi Shadrach is an international development expert with over 10 years experience working on natural resource governance and women's economic empowerment. She holds a master's degree in natural resource assessment and management from the University of Dar es Salaam. And she's currently working with Oxfam International as a women's land policy advisor, leading Oxfam's women's land rights work across the globe. Naomi Shadrach, you have the floor.
Hello.
Yes, Naomi, proceed. You can proceed, please.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to share my screen. Okay, thank you. I don't know if other participants can see my screen. They don't.
Yes, we can see your screen. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction, Balozi, and thanks for the invitation from the government of Tanzania and Landesa to speak to this event. So I'm going to speak about this important topic on women's land rights mixed with climate change, and to share why should we care about women's land rights in this important discussion on climate change. First and foremost, land is where it all begins. So land is vital to our livelihood, whether we use it for building homes, operating business, growing food, or for mere enjoyment. Land sustains us all. For developing countries, land is used for agriculture production, and families bequeath their sons and daughters through land. So land is very important for people, for livelihood, for lives of people in developing countries like Tanzania. Land is both solutions and contributor to climate change. This is very interesting, and it makes us to be very careful to discuss the issue of land. The IPCC report on land and climate of 2019 shared that land use such as agriculture, monoculture, and other land use represents 23% of greenhouse emission. This is a big contribution. But what we have learned is most of the climate change solutions, majority of the climate change solutions are land-based. So we have seen, for example, in Tanzania, we have seen a number of RED projects, which take land as the solution to climate change. So this is something interesting. While we see land uses cause climate change, but also in other way, land is a solution to climate change. But I also want to share Oxfam paper on tightening net zero, which warned the big countries like the developed countries, the most industrialized countries, which we understand they are being industrialized. It's one of the cause of climate change. They pollute more than developing countries. That they have to do something to make sure that they help to reduce climate change. And also, we have to be careful to not put a lot of burden to developing countries. They have to reduce their emission in their countries. Because if we put burden to developing countries, that means livelihood. As I said in my first slide, land which farmers, women depend for livelihood, countries depend for their development. That means we will cause hunger. So while we are working on climate change, we have to make sure that we are not disturbing livelihood of women. We are making sure that women are part of the solution. And how can this be done is to make sure that women are part of the plans, part of the discussion, and land which they are using for food production and their own development, they are part of that discussion. So women's land rights next to climate change is a very important discussion because women are the main producers of food. And this is what research has showed us. In Africa, for instance, women contribute more than 45% of agricultural labor force. So in case their women's land rights security is not going to be given the consideration, even in climate change solution, that means women are going to lose their land. And if they lose their land, that means women will not contribute much to food. And this may end to food insecurity to all citizens, not only women. So we have to put gender at the center of climate crisis combat, like in our process of combating climate change. How can we do this? In our solutions, we have to understand social and cultural dynamics in the community, how women access, control, and own resources such as land, forest, and water. One of the research I did in my master's degree, what I learned is in projects, if women are not engaged, you can change the forest, which is used by the village, to be a conservation, to conserve forest. And what I learned is women, if are not part of the process, you will find women start walking long distance to fetch firewood, to fetch herbs, and to get other resources from forests. So this is very important to understand how women access this, how women access firewood, how women produce their livelihood before going into activities which aim at combating climate change. And another thing which is very important is to make sure engaging women is meaningful. So to ensure meaningful engagement of women and other invisible groups in decision-making on land and land resources. In Tanzania, we have frameworks which are really good, which are examples and can be used by other countries to take as example. We have to use them because they allow us to do gender analysis before doing anything on land, making sure that make sure to understand how is gender. Understanding the gender dynamics in the village to make sure that by conserving land, you are not discriminating women, you are not putting them in more impoverishing position. And another important point is bring grassroots women in important discussion on climate, such as climate finance. We understand one of the ways to combat climate change is through climate finance. And these women, grassroots women, they're the ones who are facing effects of climate change a lot. So all the benefits coming from climate change have to come to them. They have to be in this discussion. They have to share what are their problems, so that when they're in the discussion, that means we are giving them power to act on climate change. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much, Balozi.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation, Naomi. Thank you very much. Now, the next presentation will be delivered by three eminent distinguished experts that they are going to share. It's going to be some sort of a joint presentation shared by three, but also divided into three parts. And I will ask them to speak in turn, starting with Dr. Monica Magoke Mhoja. And by introduction, Dr. Monica Magoke Mhoja is a country program director, Landesa, Tanzania, and she is a 2003 recipient of the American Bar Association's International Human Rights Award for significant contribution to human rights, rule of law, and access to justice, including land rights and women's rights. After Dr. Mhoja, then Advocate Tike Mwambipile will be speaking. She is Executive Director of Women's Lawyer Associations, Taula in Tanzania, and the chairperson of the Stand for Her Land campaign in Tanzania. The third speaker will be Mr. Faustin Zakaria, who is a former director of Tanzania Natural Resource Forum. So the three, and we'll have the floor, starting with Dr. Monica Magoke Mhoja, please. You have the floor.
Balozi, thank you. There was change of plans. So I will start Tike Mwambipile, and then Dr. Monica, and later on Mr. Zakaria. Yeah, but thank you for the introduction, and thank you everybody for attending this session. And we are going to highlight about the Stand for Her Land campaign that the team here is very excited to be here and also to share what so far we've been doing. With this campaign, I think some of you have heard about Stand for Her Land campaign, but for those who have not heard about it, let me give a little bit of introduction about it. The campaign was announced for the first time in November 2018 during the Trust meeting in London, and was launched in March 2019 during the World Bank meeting. And during that particular meeting, Tanzania was selected to be the pilot country for this particular campaign, because the campaign is supposed to be a global campaign. So why Tanzania was appointed or was selected to be the model or the pilot country, it was because Tanzania had already, like what Commissioner said earlier, we already have progressive land laws. At the same time, we also have strong landers, CSO network of CSOs, and there was also political will. So now, after that particular meeting, Landesa is the coordinator of the campaign globally. But also, you know, Landesa also has an office here in Tanzania. So they convene us, the civil society organization. And then during that time, that's where now we elected a chairperson who is now Taula, and then Landesa is the secretariat of this particular campaign. And we have 25 members, and those members are institutions, are CSOs. But then, in much as we have 25 CSOs as members, we also have representatives from the two ministries, that is the Ministry of Community Development, Gender, Women and Special Need, and also the Ministry of Land, Housing and Human Settlement Development. They attend our meeting as observers, because at the end of the day, you need the government to, if you want your campaign to succeed, there's no way you can succeed without the government and also us, the civil society, we work together. And so now when we started this particular campaign here in Tanzania, we had to first develop a strategic plan. For you to have a good then you need to have a strategy. So we sat together and we developed our strategy, and in which we came up with the mission statement that read: the Stand for Land Tanzania campaign aims to draw on collective advocacy to overcome institutional and societal barriers that prevent the effective enforcement and implementation of laws that protect women's rights in Tanzania. But like I said earlier, it's a global campaign, and globally, the aim of the campaign is to close the gap between policies and practices. So we had to bring it home, yeah, because to make it look, to fit into our country, whatever that we have. But at the same time, climate issue is something which is cost-cutting. You can't avoid, when you're talking about land, you cannot stop talking about climate. So that is something that for us, we have it at our heart. In whatever that we do, the issue to do with climate has got to be part of our campaign. And we have 4 main objectives that we are going to address in this particular campaign. And the first one is to address culture norms to overcome societal barriers that prevent women to realize and claim their land right. The second, to promote promotion of women use of land for economic benefit, for example, sale of produce from land. And you know, there have been some challenges here. The third one, increase women's participation in decision-making body structure and processes in land governance. And I know Commissioner talked about it, but there are some challenges here. So the campaign is also going to address this part to promote women land right in region with land-based investment. This is something that we are very happy that the country is engaging into investment, but again, there are some issues to do with the communities. How are they receiving the investors in those communities, and how are women being affected in this particular area? So we thought also we should also focus on this one, especially the rural women. And with this campaign, again, we are concentrating so much with the rural women because most of the time they are left behind. And what do we expect at the end of the day? We want to see 60% of women are able to claim land rights due to this particular campaign. But again, how? Because we want to have women who are well informed and they know their land rights. And the second one, we want to see improve economic livelihood for women. And this one is through the improved legal and regulatory framework that are pro-women land rights. And we want to see the laws. Yes, we have very progressive laws, but sometimes the implementation part, and there are also some gaps that we want to also address. And the third one, gender responsive, transformative communities. And here we want to see now women are able to access justice. When there is land conflict, then they are able to access justice freely without any fear. The fourth one, increase and improve access to land for women. And this one, we want to reduce the number of widows with no land ownership, because you know the challenges that women are facing, especially when their husband dies. And the fifth one, increase the number of women owning land individually and jointly. Yes, we have this in our laws, but then in practice, it's not the same that much. We want to see more women owning and more women owning for themselves and also jointly. And what are the activities that we have been doing? Because now this is our fourth year, if I'm not mistaken, and the sky is our limit. And there are other countries that they have just started just recently in March this year, when they launched, like 5 countries. So I know they are going to follow our example, and we are their assistant, we are leading. And some of the activities include research, use of the traditional songs, awareness raising, creation of forums, engaging parliamentarian groups, and simplified legal document, which, for example, know your right tools, which dada yangu, my sister Monica, is going to talk more about it.
Thank you very much, the chairperson, Tike Mwambipile, and thank you very much, honorable moderator. I'm now digging down on what the Stand for Her Land campaign, the 25 members have been implemented. I'm not going to be exhaustive. These 25 members have done a lot. But what I'm going to highlight is some of the activities which were done together. One of the activities which have been implemented, and this was a special when COVID-19 started, was creation of Mwanamke na Ardhi, or Women and Land application segment and data collection tool. We trained community paralegals who are our champions for Stand for Land. And these community paralegals, they are taught on the ABCs of women's land rights, issues of inheritance, issues of love marriage, all the laws which are connected to the issues of land, and of all issues, and as well issues of climate change. And actually about 500 cases have been registered in the Women and Land application. And most of the issues are related to land conflict, inheritance, women land ownership, property division on separation and divorce. And there are more than 3,000 service users who have been reached. Actually, what is very interesting is that these community paralegals, for a start, most of them are in the rural areas, and some of them are in Dar es Salaam or semi-urban areas. These paralegals do not necessarily need to, meet a lawyer. There is an application, as you see. They can contact a community member who has a problem, and legal aid service through the mobile is 24/7 online. And they can also consult a lawyer if there's anything which is very complicated. And a number of cases, especially during the COVID era, we received a number of widows who were actually harassed, or some of their property were grabbed. And so we decided to make as a pilot to support these widows. And we have land formalization project, and we have actually launched a Stand for Widows campaign, which is very necessary. This was done in collaboration with the ministry responsible for gender to ensure that although we have this campaign on Stand for Land for every woman, but we realize that some of the women are more vulnerable, more neglected, including the widows. And also you find some have in a double tragedy. You find is a widow and is a woman with disability. So we are also looking on that, but we have helped actually to formalize up to now as a pilot 50 land of these widows. Some of the very interesting work which we have done together as a Stand for Land. Last year, we organized the first national conference on women's land rights. That was on the International Day for Rural Women. And our chair, Taula, and we effect was the one who on front leading us. And of course, the ministry responsible for gender was at the center of this national conference. This was very important. We had a number of multiple approaches when we were doing this national conference. One of them were gender caravans. The caravans moving from Mwanza, that's Lake Zoni, to Kilimanjaro. And also we had the Stand for Land Marathon. This was also a very good innovative. During the marathon, when people are walking, people are surprised what is going on with T-shirts, Stand for Land, some educative information. Don't harm, these women. Land is power, land is dignity, land is hope, land is life, land is everything. As my colleague Naomi also said, we depend on land for everything. And one of the things which we did also was to launch the Know Your Rights Guide, and a blog was published. This is Know Your Rights Guide. It actually simplified, highlights step on step on our land laws, and so the community paralegals and also other facilitators and trainers could use that very efficient. You can see those are photos during the Stand for Land Marathon with my sister Lulu, the chair of Taula, and also some of us were cheerleaders. I'm telling you, that day it was, yay, Linda Ardhi ya mwanamke, that Stand for Land. And we were jovial and people were asking us questions. And also we have workshops, seminars, storytelling. We brought widows, other women from village. They gave their testimonies and how they've been helped through this campaign. And some of other activities which we did together was conducting series of webinars. At certain stage, there was no, physical meetings, and this was very powerful. I'm telling you, we organized from the government, experts on climate change and other experts on gender and development. So we want to ensure that nothing is left behind. Nobody is left behind to understand the issue of land, nature, climate change. And we had a very powerful presentations from different Stand for Land colleagues. And I can also say that in our team, the task force members, some of our colleagues have more knowledge on climate change. For instance, the TNRF, who is going to give concrete examples. So we had a meeting for a number of task force members to learn more on issues of climate change and also hear some stories on why it's very important to ensure that we integrate and mainstream climate change on whatever we are doing on our land rights programs. We also train journalists. Media is very important so that they can air our views, they can share our information and message. And what I can, for instance, share with you with our cutting across issues of climate change. and that has been a lesson to us, women actually increase their adaptive capacity to climate change, and also increase women resilience to climate impacts. And women can access incentives and finances related to climate change. And another thing is that when women participate and when women really are involved, not a paper participation, they can participate in these climate change programs, particularly those relating to climate change, smart agriculture. That it enhances women's decision making and also empowers them in addressing issues of climate change. And at this juncture, let me allow my colleague from TNRIF actually give us that concrete tools and approaches that support women to be climate change resilient in dry land. I submit. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Monica, for your well and detailed explanation about how the Highland campaign works and operates. And also thank you, excellent Ambassador, for bringing us together. I want to bring
I think, Zakaria, you have the floor, please.
climate change adaptive capacity. As my fellow said, we are the best. We are the best in terms of the women land rights in Tanzania. And my colleague from the commissioner and others demonstrate very well how we have the strong policy and the framework that guiding the process of land use planning until the women get their land rights and land tenure security. But I want to share my presentation. But we, through slideshow. Okay. To start with, I use the map of Tanzania to show, because my presentation is nexus into the natural resource perspective, to see how we can adapt climate change in challenging climate. And we can see from the map of Tanzania, the number of the conserved area we have from WMF, National Park, conserved area, etc. Well, most of us in the smallholder farm and purpose are depending to absorb the tension of climate change. But despite of our government have used some strong policy and framework to ensure that women have their right to land and they have their land in place through land use planning process, but still the women are facing some critical challenges in their production system. As you can see in the photo in my presentation, this is the land, the area with land use planning. We can see the challenges our girls, our women and our mamas are facing in their areas where they are living. So if you can see from the left side photo, is the livestock who was killed within this week from the lion. And let's imagine it is the American cow. And for the indigenous zebu, it takes up to 7 years to be in the size it looks like. But how long, how many family members will suffer from the lack of meat, despite of it produce 2 liters per day during the dry season, but it saved food security, but it was killed by a lion. That's because it is surrounding the protected area. This is because it's not because of the national park, but that is because of the climate change where the government, the wild animal, the predators move outside from their land to community land or to village land, and to bombers as well. Okay. And if you can see also the left side photo in Simanjiro, is during the drought, there is a number of livestock that was dead because of the drought. And it's beyond the government. The government provide a conducive policy and regulation to provide their land. This is within the community land, but they have died. Also, in the right-hand side, there is the number of elephants that are moving from the protected area, from the WMA to farming area, to distract the crops, etc. It's not their fault. It's because they don't access pasture, they don't access water within their conserved area. So they have to force to move from where they stay to look at alternative how they can survive, where they can affect women land rights and women life and women survival in their land, in their area. How we can confront climate change crisis in those challenging environments, because we cannot leave them to die. We have to support them. This is where we can go to the question as we have to go beyond the land use planning process. If we want to go beyond the land use planning process, as you can see from my slide, we need now to come down and to think more. What alternative we can do to save our mama? What alternative we can do to save our girls in the rural area? Despite of they have the land, they have the CCRO, we have allocated the communal land for grazing, for farming, but still they are facing a number of challenges because of the climate change. And the government cannot support each individual, but we need a local response at the community, at the local level. These are some of the approach that we can do to support our mamas and our women in line with the land rights. One of them is you can see the tool. You can see the rain harvesting tank. You can see like a very simple tool, like a business as usual, but it's a safe lever, it's a lifesaver. A lifesaver because when you can see this is a sick animal. In the end of 2091, there is a prolonged drought in the number of livestock dead. So for this size of livestock, you can get it for $35 because nowhere to sell. And they cannot move from one point to another to seek water or pastures, but we have to live with it, or we have to sell it for $35. But for those pastors that have supported with the water harvesting tank, they use this tank not for the purpose of collecting water from the rain, but to use the tractors to fill it during the drought season, to go distance area, even the neighboring district, to fill the tank and use that to support the sick cow, small, and the milking cow to survive. You can see from the back of the cow, there is a mama who is happy, crying with tears because he's now seeing his cow is surviving. He will not die again because of the drought. So this is one of the tools that we can go down beyond the land use plan process to support these two smallholder farmers and the pastoralists in their locality. There is no need to construct a structure like a building, but even to invest to water harvesting tank, 1,000 liters, is about 1,000 US dollar to support life. So it's my call to the government partners to look further how we can support these women who have already acquired land rights. Another tool is about within the conservation area. The other side of the slide is WMA, wildlife management area. And the another in the right-hand side is the farming side. People, they are farming there, they make irrigation, but you can see the number of elephants that come across from the protected area or conserved area to distract crops. So when the big group like that enter into your farm, within 1 hour, everything will be disappear. So there is a tool, there is a predator bomber, predator behind fencing as a buffer zone because these elephants are detecting to bees when they come and quickly and run away. So instead of reallocating these women in those their land, instead of shifting them their production system from that area and convert to conservation to other areas, You can use this tool as a buffer zone to protect them so that they can continue to produce, because also soil suitability to continue harvesting the crop for the year and increase the resilience capacity to climate change. There's also other tools within the grazing land. We can see that the pastoralists are using to live within the WMA, within the grazing land. But accidentally, in a number of the cases, because of a climate change, women, the lion, the predators, they used to move from where they came from because of inaccessible to a number of wildlife to eat livestock, cow, goats. So how they can do we allow women to shift from their ancestral land to other area? They will not cope with the environment. So the best way to do is to support them with the predator-proof bomber. And in the name of the wildlife perspective, when they see this fence, they assume this is a trap for them, a trap. So a lion cannot touch this, even a hyena cannot touch this. They run away. So the predator-proof bomber have been proven as an effective way to protect livestock and other small animals from the predators. So the use of predator-proof bomber can support to improve the climate resilience in their locality in the case of the changing climate change. There is other tool like when you have the land use planning process to allocate the grazing land. There is other approach tool that we can use to develop rangeland management plan and to support the secured land with reseedling. The secure land with reseedling so that we can select some of the seeds, reseedling that is climate resilience, like citric seeds. Is climate resilient, even though the elephants they can come to grass in this area for a number of hours. But after some time or after the rain comes, this grass they germinate again and continue to support livestock. So it might call also development partners when they can see when there is any grazing land, especially for the area surrounding the bombers, to support them with this full approach of reseedling to the rangeland so that they can have climate resilience. The American cow, the sick livestock, they can access pasture within their locality. Also, there is other means, like you can see, when we can support the issue of CCRO to some of the grazing land. Yeah, they have the grazing land. So we have some evidence, some of the community members, because they have the CCRO in their land, in the grazing land, they have the residents to record.
Progress.
Support some of the infrastructure in their area because it now belongs to them. Before that, they cannot dare to invest in their land because they don't have assured that it belongs to them. But if you support them with CCRO, like what we did to the women and some of the communal land, they part of themselves, they mobilize themselves to support with the infrastructure that will support their climate resilience capacity to survive, to see tomorrow. Also, there is some of the initiative that was even yesterday was mentioned by my fellow UCRT, the women fora. The women fora also, they were capacitated women to take role in protecting or take management of rangeland. And when the resources are taken care by women, you can know how strict they are to ensure that no one can go against the bylaw. Also for the area that's surrounding the protected area, because this is the village game scout, they move from the community. They were trained how they can make patrol so that they can protect wild animals from the protected area to the starting crops within the community. So these are some of the key strategies and the tools that we can support women beyond the land use process so that they can be climate resilience. At the end of the day, we can see how the women will be the confidence is to survive despite of the threat of climate change, but they are accessing milk. They also take care of the sick cows when the majority of the cow move from one area to another. So once we support them with that kind of infrastructure, it's where now we can support also the education sector because the children and the girls, they stay at home, accessing milk, accessing food, and also they attend the school. And also women, they get food security as well, so that we can support women as well as the whole head and the family through the improved technology that is user-friendly and we cannot think to reallocate pastoralists or smallholder farmers from their area because of this climate change. It's beyond the government. The government will play their role to come with the clear policy, regulation, and guidance to issue right to the women, but now have to go further to invest into this approach. Thank you.
I thank Advocate TK Mwampile, Dr. Monica Magoke Mhoja, and Mr. Faustin Zakaria for your very informative presentation. The next speaker is Honorable Angela Kairuki. She's the chairperson of the National Advisory and Coordination Committee for the Generational Equality in Tanzania. She's also a former cabinet minister who was in charge of investment, minerals, public service and good governance, land, housing and human settlement development, as well as constitutional affairs. She also served as a member of parliament and the vice chairperson of Parliamentarian Committee on Constitution, Legal Affairs and Public Administration, and Secretary General of Tanzania Women Parliamentarians. Her speech today will be on the role of Gender Equality Forum on land nexus, climate change, and economic empowerment of women. Honorable Angela Kairuki, you have the floor. You are muted, please. Can you unmute?
Says I cannot share my screen because the other participant is still sharing the screen.
Oh, okay.
So if the other side can put my
Yes.
presentation also, it's on my side.
Sure. Please, Mr. Zakaria, if you can be helped to attend to this issue.
You can, it's done now. You can share your screen.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, hold on. Can you see it now? Perfect. Okay. Honorable Minister, Dr. Gwajima, the Minister responsible for Gender and Women Affairs, Your Excellency Ambassador Professor Kennedy Gaston, our Tanzania Permanent Representative at United Nations, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good evening. I am so glad to be presenting at the margin of the CSW meetings on this side event on behalf of the Committee on Generation Equality Forum Tanzania. And on this, as the moderator has already highlighted, I'll be presenting on the role of the Generation Equality Forum on land nexus, climate change, and economic empowerment of women. And particularly, I will give a background of the Generation Equality Forum for Tanzania, but also provide a concrete update on the progress that has been reached for Generation Equality Forum Tanzania and the ministry since the closure of the Generation Equality Forum that was held in Paris. Next. Sorry. And for this one, sorry for that technology hiccup. And for this one, as I mentioned earlier, I'll provide the background but also the Nexus on Land Rights, Economic Empowerment and Climate Change Nexus, but also the plans ahead of us as the GEF National Advisory Coordinating Committee. As you all know, the genesis of the Beijing Declaration, which started since 1995, and it had its own platform of action that each country was implementing. And this is the genesis of having a Generation Equality Forum, whereby the main focus was to ensure that there's an acceleration of the implementation, and that's why the Generation Equality Forum was given birth, and mainly it's just to accelerate the speed towards implementation. There are 6 thematic areas, and for this one also Tanzania is one of the member states participating, and we are very glad that Tanzania committed to implement the 2nd thematic area on women, economic justice and rights, as we believe that it is a vehicle towards the realization of gender equality, but also women empowerment. And we are very happy and excited since Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, our president, has also agreed to champion the implementation. As for Tanzania, Generation Equality for Tanzania, we've already developed a program which is in its finalization, but also as the Tanzanian chapter, the program has already been launched on the 16th December 2021 by Her Excellency, the President of the United Republic of Tanzania herself. And through this program, it is a demand-driven program. And as I mentioned earlier, we are now in the finalization process of a program strategy. And it is a program that will be implemented in 5 years, from 2021 to 2026. And it is implemented in a participatory manner. And the way it is, it builds upon what the sectors are already implementing in the annual plans. So there's nothing new, it's just to make sure that we upscale the implementation and to make sure that everything comes into order. And also it is a multi-sectoral approach in its implementation. As we understand the commitments that Tanzania has made, we made 11 commitments, and most of these commitments are cutting across several public and private sector interests. So as such, we have to make sure that we use the multi-sectoral approach. And for Generation Equality Forum Tanzania, we have a National Advisory and Coordinating Committee, which is composed of 25 members, all of whom have been appointed by the President of the United Republic of Tanzania. And out of that 25 membership, 19 members are coming from Tanzania mainland, and 6 of whom are coming from Zanzibar, and all of whom are experts from different sectors. And the committee is led by the chairperson whom is speaking. But also on the governance structure side, we already started working on our mandate since December 2021, when the committee was officially launched by Her Excellency the President. And the way the committee plan is designed, it's designed to make sure that we meet quarterly so as to provide strategic direction, but also oversight role towards the implementation of the program, but also towards the projects related to the different sectors in the program strategy. But also the committee has a secretariat which is already in place. And the secretariat is seated at the Ministry of Community Development and Gender and Women Affairs. And they've been very, very proactive and very helpful so far. And we have been working very closely with them, and they've provided a very necessary support. But later on, when the program strategy is ready, we'll have a National Technical Committee, but also a technical working groups. And out of that, we hope to have 8 technical working groups based on the 8 key result areas that we'll implement throughout our program strategy. But we also have a National Steering Committee, whereby for this one, we hope it will be seated at the Prime Minister's office, and it will be co-chaired from the Prime Minister's office through the Minister of State in charge of coordination and policy and parliament, but also will be co-chaired by the Minister of State from Zanzibar as well, for the Revolutionary Government of Zanzibar on the same portfolio. Currently, as I rightly said before, we already have a draft of our program strategy, and it is in the finality towards finalization. With regards to the land rights nexus on economic empowerment and climate change, Most of the issues have been said, but for this one, I just want to give a small linkage towards our Generation Equality Forum for Tanzania, and what on the other aspects of economic empowerment, at least what is the relation and linkage, and what exactly our committee will be prioritizing on it. As towards the women land rights in Tanzania, as we understand, it's only 7.4% of the Tanzanian women owning houses individually, and this is compared to 25.6% of men. But also it's only 8.1% of the Tanzanian women who own land individually, as compared to 25% of the Tanzanian men. And this situation has really made it very difficult for Tanzanian women to prosper, especially economically, on the same equal footing with our men. As you can see, the different percentage there, where only women own 8.1% as compared to women owning men owning 25% of the land. But also, as far as economic inequalities are concerned, we all understand that most of Tanzanian women are engaged in agriculture, and we even had some of the percentage between 60 to 70%. But also most of our women engaged in informal sector, where it's all known that there's a lot of job insecurity, a lot of low earnings, but also the working conditions, long hours, which are still very prevalent. But also as regards to social protection, most of our Tanzanian women working in informal sector, but also in agriculture and other economic livelihood sectors, are very disadvantaged as towards the social protection systems, but they also experience low coverage rates, and has a lot impacted on their economic life and livelihood as well. As regards to the climate change, we've seen that there's a lot of pressure which has been put on land, and this has increased a lot of vulnerability of communities, as you all understand that they rely a lot on the climate change and on the land for their livelihood. But further to that, we've seen a lot of unpredictable climates and natural disasters, a lot of land degradation, wildlife habitat destructions, which have all been undeniable. And really this is calling for an urgent holistic land management solutions, but also for responses that will restore ecosystems, that will build resilience, that will also reduce emissions, but also strengthen land rights. And we believe that if this is all done right, sustainable and inclusive land management, but also land governance, can be a powerful tool for tackling climate change. I'll just here show a diagram, basically on the areas that I mentioned earlier on. The way there's an impact of climate change on the crops through agriculture. Hence, there's food shortage for our people, and the one who will be the most sufferer is the woman. But also when there is a climate change, there will be the water scarcity. And for this one, obviously, it is the woman who will spend a lot of time fetching for water. And at the end of the day as well, it will be difficult for her to finalize some of her duties at her family, but also to have even enough time to be engaged in other things like education, but also it will impact her health, but also towards that, she cannot even engage in other economic activities as well. But also on the energy side, obviously there will be a fuel shortage, as we all know that most of our women highly depend on our natural resources, particularly like firewood collection. So through this one, when there is a climate change, there will be fuel shortage and energy shortage. So our women will spend a lot of time fetching for firewood, which is very difficult for them, and they'll spend a lot of time, and as such, it will impoverish their livelihood as well. As you can see, there's also natural disasters, diseases, but also some of the displacement of our people when there's forced migration, and it also increases their vulnerability. Sorry. For this one, I would also like next to share with you, before I go on our game-changing plans as the committee, but also as the country. This is one of the quotations that our Excellency, the President of Tanzania, she made at New York during the 76th debate session of the United Nations General Assembly. And I quote as follows: "As the first female president in the history of my country, the burden of expectation to deliver gender equality is heavier on my shoulders. Being passionate about gender equality is not sufficient, and as such, my government is reviewing policy and legal frameworks in order to come up with actionable and measurable plans to ensure economic empowerment of women and other aspects pertaining to gender equality and gender parity." The end of quote. And this is the commitment that our president is continuing to make towards Tanzania, towards our region, internationally, but also for all the world. We can see the way she's committed and the way she's really championing economic empowerment, but also gender equality for Tanzania. And for this one, we have no doubt. As towards the game-changing plans, I would like to focus on basically 4 areas, or I can say priorities, whereby Generation Equality Forum Tanzania will focus on land rights, but also on climate change. The first one being on increasing direct access to financing for gender just climate solutions, in particular for women and girls at grassroots level, but secondly, to enable women and girls to lead a just transition to a green economy, and thirdly, we intend to target on building resilience to climate impacts for women and girls through land rights and tenure security. And fourthly, to increase the collection and use of data on the gender environment nexus. If I touch on the first one on increasing direct access to financing, for this one, we intend to make sure that we work very closely with the Green Climate Fund, accredited entities like CRDB Bank. We understand there's a funding that CRDB has been awarded. And for this one, we work very closely with them to ensure that the climate finance that is accessed through different climate finance mechanisms will reach women and girls equitably. And through this Generation Equality Forum program, the government will also ensure the programs that are designed will be using these facilities, but also they will make sure that they are gender transformative and gender disaggregated data on access to climate finance will be reported annually. But secondly, through our local government authority soft loans, we'll make sure that there is a guideline, a further guideline that will be issued to support the local government authorities to identify and support women's groups who are working on climate solutions, including climate resilience agriculture, ecology rehabilitation, recycling, seascape restoration, but also similar activities relating to climate solutions. And thirdly, we mobilize the broad private sector and financial institutions to create on platforms and provide financial and technical support to girls and women eco-entrepreneurs, but also scale up the innovation and business. Another area will be on enabling women and girls to lead a just transition to a green economy. And for this one, we intend to make sure that there is an appointment of a national gender and climate change focal point to coordinate gender and climate justice nexus, champion the gender equality agenda, but also to be participating in program designs and implementation. But further to this, there'll also be a creation and support of a platform for gender and climate experts so as to nurture and grow the capacity, but also leadership of gender experts in shaping a system-wide response. We also intend to make sure that we build resilience to climate impacts for women and girls through land rights and tenure security. A lot of this has been said, and we intend to make sure that we work very closely with the CSOs, but also the other implementing partners working on land rights and tenure security. And as such, we'll make sure there's an upscaling of awareness creation and public campaigns, but also make sure that there will be an inspiration and motivation for women to own land, but development of gender implementation strategies for land policy to ensure women's land rights are not limited to access, but also for security and control. But also, as we understand on our land policies and legislation, for this one, it will also ensure that there is a removal of barriers and challenges to land ownership that are discouraging our women to own land. And lastly, to explore and strengthen community-based cooperative models for land rights, but also for tenure security. We also intend to increase the collection and use of data on the gender environment nexus. And for this one, we intend to make sure that we conduct a targeted and specific research on the intersection of gender, climate, but also economy and land. And as such, we also intend to develop guidelines that will ensure all environmental data collected through the Prime Minister's office, but also through our National Bureau of Statistics or any other mandated institutions to make sure that the agenda is segregated. And lastly, for land rights as well, we make sure that we expand on women's access to and control over land by 2026, because 2026 is the year where it's the end of our mandate, but also will ensure there's a review of laws and policies, and thereafter elimination of gender discriminatory laws and policy provisions, but also adoption and implementation of laws, policies, strategies, and investments that we realize on women's and girls' access to and control over productive resources and valuable assets, but also identification and challenging of harmful social norms, stereotypes, and practices that are impeding our women and girls from equitably controlling and benefiting from productive resources, but also embracing on positive attitudes that are validating women's empowerment, but also economic contributions. And lastly, I would just like, before I conclude, I would like to reaffirm on the Generation Equality Forum Tanzania's commitments, but also to assure our stakeholders of continued engagement, particularly the public sector, private sector, women, youth organizations, civil society organizations, UN Women and other UN agencies, academia, women organizations, research institutions throughout the implementation phase of our Generation Equality Forum program. I thank you, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
I thank Honorable Angela Kairuki for your very interesting and informative, but also very promising representation on the work that you are doing with your committee. The next speaker is Honorable Hodan Adu. She is the UN Women Representative to Tanzania since April 2018. She has over 25 years of experience in promoting gender equality and women's empowerment. And prior to Tanzania, she served as the country representative in Uganda, Zimbabwe, and in Sudan. She also held senior policy advisor at country and regional program coordination positions in East, Central, and Southern Africa, as well as at the headquarters here in New York. She's going to present on insights from the social institutions and gender index and agricultural land interventions in Singida, Tanzania. Honorable, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Let me first by recognizing Honorable Dorothy Gwajima, the Minister for Community Development, Gender, Women and Special Groups here in Tanzania. Your Excellency, Professor Gaston Kennedy, Ambassador to the United Nations, and our moderator for this evening. It's already evening here in Dar es Salaam. Ms. Abeida Abdullah, the Deputy Permanent Secretary responsible for gender in Zanzibar, Honorable Angela Kairuki, the Chair of the Generation Equality Forum and National Advisory Committee for Tanzania, my fellow guest speakers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Mabibi, Mabwana, good evening, Habari, Zachoni. It is a great honor to be able to participate in this very important session of the CSW side event on women's land rights, accelerating gender equality and confronting climate crisis. Before I begin, I would like to first congratulate the Ministry of Community Development, Gender, Women, and Special Groups, Landesa, and all stakeholders for the successful organization of this important session. Next slide, please. The timing of this discussion could not be more urgent. As we are all aware, women are powerful agents of building climate resilience because of their unique roles and possession of knowledge on the management of natural resources. And climate justice begins with secure land rights, as we've heard earlier. In order to enhance and leverage the capacity of women and girls to build resilient lives to climate and disaster risk and mitigate climate change, they need to have more control over resources. They also need securing women's land rights, increasing their agricultural productivity, increases their decision-making abilities at household and community level, and boosts their ability to influence change. As this was noted by earlier speakers, the Tanzania Land Act recognizes women's rights to property and tenure, but unfortunately, the customary practices and norms continue to inhibit these rights, effectively excluding women from key decision-making processes at the village and rural areas overall. Obviously, the challenges to rights to land are even greater for women with disabilities and other women vulnerable groups, as mentioned earlier, such as elderly women, widows, and women with HIV/AIDS. Understanding the social norms and institutions behind social discriminatory factors is critical. Next slide, please. This month, UN Women released a country study on the Social Institutions Gender Index, or SIGI, with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and in close collaboration with the National Bureau of Statistics, the Office of the Chief Government Statistician in Zanzibar, and with a generous financial support from the Embassy of Ireland. The study provides a data-driven analysis to help us better understand how discriminatory social norms and practices continue to constrain women's empowerment and restrict their access to opportunities and rights. Next slide, please. The SIGI report provides further evidence on persistent social norms and attitudes that hamper women's land rights and land tenure security. Despite the legislation such as the Land Act, the data within the report shows that significantly fewer women than men own agricultural land, with only 33% at the national level compared to 47% of men, a gender gap of 14%. In rural areas where agriculture is the primary source of employment, the gap reaches 17% points. The good news is that the report also shows that discriminatory attitudes are changing in Tanzania, with the vast majority of Tanzania's population, over 90%, agreeing that men and women should have equal access to agricultural land ownership and should enjoy equal decision-making power over land owned. However, there's still work to be done to transform attitudes regarding inheritance practices, with a study indicating that nearly 1 out of 5 people believe that a daughter should not have the same opportunities and rights as a son to inherit land. At the village level, the dominance of men in local governance structures, such as land tribunals and councils, which are instrumental in land abjuration and processes, lessens women's voice in important decisions. Women are also frequently excluded from specific processes related to land use planning, parceling, and land registration, which effectively obstruct their involvement in the overall process of land administration and the provision of land titles. Next slide, please. In order to address the factors driving the root causes of land restrictions that women and girls face, a holistic approach is required. One promising initiative that I would like to share is our ongoing partnership in 4 villages in the Ikundi district of Singida region that aims to strengthen land rights and land tenure security for women and female, in particular female-headed households. In close collaboration with the Ministry of Lands and the Ikundi district, the project has facilitated, as was said earlier, the development of village land use plans and issuance of certificates of customary rights and occupancy. Just this week, I'm happy to share that over 5,000 certificates were issued to Ikundi residents, where over 40% of these were issued to women, with a significant step forward compared to the initial situation where women owned less than 10%. Next slide, please. Essential to this success was the substantial community sensitization work that was undertaken through the program in the last 2 years to address negative social norms and raise awareness among village councilors, committees, and the communities at large on women's land rights and tenure security. The sensitization, I'm happy to say, builds on other ongoing efforts, including, as was said just recently, the Stand for Her Land campaign led by Landesa and our very close partner, Taula, which UN Women has been supporting in the past years. Another promising initiative is our new program entitled Women and Girls Meaningful Participation, Leadership, Economic Rights are Strengthened at Local Level in Tanzania. That program aims to increase the number of women in positions of power at local government level through promoting gender responsive local governance, tackling issues in women's economic rights, and piloting gender and disability transformative innovative measures such as care services. With the funding from Finland, the project will work closely with a wide range of stakeholders, including the Ministry of Community Development, Gender, Women, and Special Groups, community development officers, village and ward executive officers, women farmers, women economic empowerment groups, among others. We hope through this program that women's representation at village and local governance will increase women's voices and decision-making in such important processes as land tribunal counselors in land use planning, land registration, but also important decisions around climate action and environment as it affects the lives of rural women. Next slide, please. So ladies and gentlemen, let me then share some best practices and lessons learned from our programming as a way forward. One, I think, is important, it was stated earlier, the important need to strengthen existing legal and policy frameworks as very much closely tied to addressing social norms and practices. We need to look carefully at laws and practices and policies that might have some loopholes that can actually then prevent women from realizing their full rights. And we're very glad that the ministry has taken that on as a priority area of focus. We also need to consider the implementation of quotas that already exist in Tanzania and local government structures. Here we need to ensure that guarantees of women's equal representation in land governance bodies such as land tribunals and councils, and also in other decision-making issues around in terms of water access, issues of climate change as well. So how do we ensure that there's quotas in terms of representation, even though the policy says that, but sometimes the reality on the ground is not. So we need to harmonize that. Improving also the dissemination of gender and land rights data is very critical, especially sexual and disaggregated data to inform policies, as well as also as efforts to support advocacy and reaching out to communities and populations to address I'm sorry, I think I was muted. So let me just finish up then. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, something happened, I was muted. And I think that the last point is what I was saying is that we need to also look at various efforts of capacity building as well. So through these initiatives, as two examples among many program interventions that we're doing here in Tanzania, we've seen that the benefits that come from enabling women to take control of land rights, from expanding to women's business activities, to better health and nutrition, to women's increased participation in local and regional governance, and on the sustainable management of natural resources. We know that securing women's land rights and tenure is essential to tackling climate and other environmental challenges faced by women, particularly women in rural areas. So investing in women's access to land and assets is a direct investment in all of our sustainable development future. And UN Women, I'm happy to say, is working very closely with the government of Tanzania, and particularly our Ministry for Community Development, Gender, Women, and Special Groups. And we hope to continue to work with other key players and other sectoral ministers in achieving this end. So asante sana, and thank you very much.
Asante sana, Hoda Nadu, for your very informative presentation, but also really sharing the best lessons we can get from the field. And with that note, let me once again thank all presenters. Really, this has been a wonderful session with eminent, distinguished, and experts, really very seasoned in your areas of field, but also more important, it was really some sort of a cross-cutting picture that we could get from the government side, from the civil society organization, but also from the development partners that are working in the same issues relating to land rights and focusing also on women empowerment. Now, as I indicated earlier, that we have a chat box where I can see a good number of comments, questions there. As we move to the next session, where we are going to have some sort of, a Q&A session, but we don't really need to have questions. We can also have some sort of additional comments from the other participants who, apart from panelists, but also if you have any specific question addressing a particular panelist, this is again the time to do so. And I just want to share with you a few comments and questions that I can see from the chat box. A good number of them addressed to Honorable Commissioner. For example, one participant is asking, do we know the percentage of available lands or available tribal lands? Do we have a percentage in Tanzania of how much constitutes a tribal or tribal lands? That's one. And in which regions are they mostly located? That's one question. The other question also addressed to Honorable Commissioner is that the government embarked on review process of the land policy since 2016. And they're asking, where are we now? When should we expect that the process will be finalized? I think those questions again may be addressed by the ministry. There is also another comment here which says that we have extremely good laws, but the major challenge is in the implementations, as echoed by Commissioner, and therefore there is a need to bridge the gap between law and practice. There is also another comment from all the interpreters. Really, I apologize that I wasn't able to read your question until now. So I think we'll just leave it at that. And so many other questions. But I think for the time being, I wonder whether Honorable Commissioner may wish to address those specific questions. And then I will raise other 3 questions in the round, and then again open the floor to any participant who may wish to, take the floor. Honorable Commissioner, are you still with us? Can you respond to those few questions briefly in 1 or max 2 minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Actually, I responded in the chat box. First of all, I would want to state that in Tanzania, we don't have tribal lands. In Tanzania, we have only 3 categories of land. That is general land, village land, and reserved land. So in the village land category, that's where land is managed customarily. And actually, that takes the huge percentage amongst the 3 categories that I've mentioned. It is more than 50% of the village land where villagers actually own land customarily. So we don't have tribal land in this country. The 3 categories, as I've mentioned, are the 3 categories in this country with respect to the tenure category that we have in this country. The other area that I would want to share is it was with regard to the land policy. Actually, we were in the process to review it, and we actually, there was a very big involvement of CSOs, NGOs, and all actually private enterprises, because actually it was very vital to look into the land policy to deal with these difficulties that actually had impact when it comes to ownership of land for women, particularly in the area of inheritance, where it was clearly provided that when it comes to inheritance of land for a woman, consideration has to be made to the customs and tradition of that particular tribe. So the review actually means to eradicate all these issues and practices that can have an impact on women access to land. Where we are in terms of the land policy, we are in the final stages of approval, and we thank God maybe it might come out anytime. I think those are the questions which were addressed to me. Otherwise, somebody actually, I think it was Naomi, asked me in the chat box, I think, how do we coordinate amongst ministries when it comes to dealing with climate change crisis? We all know that when it comes to land use planning, we involve almost all the key sectors. And we know that we have 40 million hectares of land, agricultural land in this country. And now we are in the process to ensure that whenever we prepare land use plans that designates area for forestry, areas for agriculture, those are the areas we need to gazette and protect them to an extent that women have access to them, and that, well, they have an equal opportunity and to use them as men and as it's supposed to be done. That is the way I can respond to the questions addressed to me. Thank you very much.
Honorable Commissioner, I thank you very much for your response to the questions from the participants. Now the floor again is open. If again, if you need to raise any question, please, you can I think raise your hand. I'll see you on the screen here, and then I should be able to give you the floor. Let me quickly check if there is anyone wishing to take the floor. I see none, but again, I understand that perhaps there are also questions. I think a good number of them, good number of questions seem to be addressed to Honorable Commissioner. There is a question here. I don't know whether that's a question which you already had responded to it from, I think, Naomi, namely, how does different ministries, such as energy, agriculture, livestock, and conservation, and the Prime Minister's office work together to ensure there is a balance between conservation, livelihood, and the combating climate change? And I think, Honorable Commissioner, you have adequately responded to that question. Yeah, I think I want to also thank really Honorable Commissioner, because yes, the land tenure in Tanzania somehow sound to be tricky, especially when you look at it from the perspective of other African countries, where they do have a category of tribal land as a distinct category of tenure. But I think that's very clear that in Tanzania, there are only those categories, as Commissioner pointed out, namely the general land and the village land, and the third one would be reserved land. And therefore, the customary tenure falls largely within the framework of village land. I think that really brings more clarity to better understand how the land tenure is. Okay. Now, there was also a question to Honorable Angela Kairuki. There was a question on the prospects of the committee in view of other related challenges. But I don't know whether Honorable Angela Kairuki, you may wish to maybe highlight just in a minute the prospects. I know you have covered it, but I think someone needs some sort of more reassurance or more details about it. If you are there.
Hello.
Yes, you have the floor.
Oh, okay, thank you for the question, and thank you, moderator. Maybe lastly, I can just reassure that there's a lot of prospects with regard to women economic empowerment in Tanzania, and the other related issue that we've already discussed on land rights, but also climate change, resilience, and adaptability. But I would just like to highlight, or concluding by giving the person reassurance that if you invest in the economic empowerment of women, but also if you invest in the promotion of gender equality, for sure you'll have a broad multiplier effects for human development, due to the fact that there's a positive correlation between development, but also children's health, but also education. But we understand if you have a child who has an economic empowered mother, obviously this child will escape poverty, this child will have a good health, this child will be immunized, this child will be confident, but also this child will prosper, will have the best well-being in childhood, but also for the benefits of the family, the well-being of their children as well. For sure, it is a good investment. And for this, that's why Mama Samia, our beloved president, chose the second thematic area to ensure that we champion on the women's economic justice and rights. And for this one, with our colleagues, CSOs, our colleagues, UN Women and other agencies, we know that Tanzania by 2026 will be the champion for the women economic justice and rights. So I can assure the person who asked me a question that there is a lot of prospects on this. Kindly let's work together. kindly let's cooperate together. If there's any issue, the committee is there, the ministry is there, and we are ready to serve you.
I thank you very much, Honorable Angela Kairuki, for that reassurances. I'm given another question here from team at this end that there is a question to Landesa. And can you quickly comment on a smart agriculture? That's to Landesa. And I think the question requires you to comment, bearing in mind technological advancement as the access or lack of it for women. Landesa? Landesa, are you with us? Now, I think, Landesa, I don't know if, are you facing some difficulties? Are you there or? Yes, please. Yes, I see Adija Mrisho trying to respond. Is that?
Different expertise and on smart agriculture, our colleagues from Tenure will give you some.
Hello. To respond on that, in the production system, there is a pastoralism production system and the farming production system. And in the case of farming production system, we are focusing to create sensitization to the community, the type of crop that is climate resilient. In such a case that if there is a low rainfall, we can popularize the community to come with the species and the breed. That is, they can use less rainfall. Instead of 6 months maize, they can use the crop that can produce crop within 3 months. And also there is some crop that is resilient to drought. We can select of them, like a good example, like Singida, there is some specific crop where the regional commissioner is advising the community to grow within these climate issues. And where there is issue of floods also, we come out to advise community the type of crop where they can be invested in the production system so that they can be climate resilience. This depends on the ecological zone and the type of production systems you are investing. There is other area there is heavy rainfall, where there is supportive irrigation system. We come with some smart technology that can support irrigation and save community within that challenging climate.
Thank you very much, Landesa, for that. And again, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the time allocated for the side event is 2 hours basically, and we are really, again, running short, and we have to perhaps bring this important and a very interesting discussion to, maybe we postpone it to another day, another date, and I hope that the organizers will see fit to really expand on today's discussion, to have more of these discussions, which really informs and try to reinforce each other's work as we work together towards the same goal. At this note, I will now invite Honorable Benny Issa, who is Executive Secretary of National Economic Empowerment Council. She's going to deliver the closing remarks. And before she does that, I just want to again leave you with a quote. I just want to leave you with a quote from Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, during her speech in Glasgow on November 2nd, 2021, on the sidelines of the World Leaders Summit in Glasgow during the COP26. And I quote, "It is important that women have equal access to knowledge, awareness, capacity building, resources, and technology, which are prerequisite in influencing climate change. Similarly, it is fundamental that women participate more actively in decision-making and policy development at all levels," end of quote. I think this is really a very important quote because it reinforces most of what we have been discussing here in the past 2 hours. With that note, let me now invite Bengi Issa, the Executive Secretary of National Economic Empowerment Council, to close our session. You have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Permanent Representative to the Tanzania, to the United Nations here in New York, Honorable Dr. Dorothy Gwajima, Minister for Community Development, Gender, Women, and Special Groups, distinguished delegates and representatives from the member states, representatives from the different ministries, departments, and agencies here in Tanzania, United Nations agencies, representatives from non-government organizations, civil societies, and community-based organizations, presenters.
You are muted, you are muted, you are muted, please.
Thank you very much. I guess now you can hear me. Your Excellency, Professor Kennedy Gaston, the Permanent Representative of Tanzania to the United Nations, Honorable Dr. Dorothy Gwajima, Minister for Community Development, Gender, Women, and Special Groups, distinguished delegates, representatives from the member states, representatives from the different ministries, departments, and agencies here in Tanzania, United Nations agencies, representatives from non-government organizations, civil society, and community-based organizations, presenters, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Allow me to take this opportunity to first to register my sincere appreciation to the organizers of this side event of the 66 sessions of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, CSW 66. Therefore, I give thanks to the Minister of Community Development, Gender, Women, and Special Groups, and the Landesa, Tanzania. And I also recognize tireless and high support from the Office of the Permanent Representative of Tanzania to the United Nations, in particular His Excellency Professor Gaston Kennedy, for making this event possible and his excellent moderation of the event. Mr. Chairman, today's event is centered on women's land rights, accelerating gender equality, and confronting the climate crisis. Presentations from the eminent experts, comments, and questions from the audience were all in agreement to that. Women are both victims and agents of change in the fight of climate change crisis. The introduction from the moderator and the keynote speech from Honorable Dr. Dorothy Gwajima were a foundation for building on the discussion. Out of this event, I have personally learned a lot from what civil societies and development partners are working to complement the work of the government to ensure generational equality. It is therefore critical to enhance this collaboration since we all aim to attain the same goal. Mr. Chairman, the work of the Technical Task Force on Gender Equality Forum, Generation Equality Forum, stand for her, land, and the Oxfam set ground for a promising future. It is therefore important to document the success and challenges to inform the government on what works best. We from the government, our doors are open anytime to receive advice and collaborate to advance women's lands rights in acceleration to gender equality and confront the climate crisis. Our President, Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, has shown us the way to be accountable and ensure an equal future by committing to be the champion of economic justice and rights of the GEF Action Coalition. The expertise and composition of the technical task force chaired by Honorable Dr. Angela Kairuki, and our support is crucial to achieve these commitments. As we come to the end of the session, I urge the organizers to develop a consolidated report to be submitted to the government for record and consideration on the recommendations. I once again record my sincere appreciation for the organization of the event, excellent presentations, excellent moderation, and active audience participation. With these few remarks, I officially close this session, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much. And now, to this note, once again, the meeting has been closed. But I want to record again my thanks to the technical team for their able manner in the way they have facilitated our session, interpreters, interpretation services, but all of you really for taking your time. And once again, to thank the eminent speakers really who have offered a lot. We have learned a lot, and I think we can be proud of them. And we are really proud again of activities that are taking place on the ground in Tanzania. As they say, local can be global, and I'm sure those best practices in Tanzania, they should not only be left to Tanzanians only, but they should be shared globally so that they can bring even more impact from that. With that, again, I wish you a good day and a good evening, depending on where you are. And until we meet again, the meeting is closed. Thank you.
Wale wadudu hawajeje. Wadudu wa.
Mawazo yalikuwa tena Hey, thank you. Shala kuamka usiku unaanza kuongea na mawazo jamani. Imeisha. Kwa sababu napata mawazo.
Esa nani si asubuhi.
Leo ni huyo. Sogea inama tu. Nani?
Kwani TV?
So, and it's so interesting. Very hard presentation.
Hata mtu mwenyewe alikutajia kumwambia IT atafute mule. Ndio kama embarrassment jana anamuita profesa kuja. Mimi nimemtumia toka tunaanza. Naomba namba ya huyo mtu.
Oi. Habari zimechukua vizuri. Cha muhimu Tanzania wajue ambacho kimeendelea Oxfam. Thank you very much. and kila mtu, Mungu awabariki.
Hongereni kwa kweli.